A quick example with dialogue, and then finally an example with partnership. Well, dialogue, there's an example of Target. In New Zealand, you have a big discount retailer called Warehouse. We have three big ones, of course, in the US, Kmart, Walmart, and Target. Well, what happened with Target is there was a billboard of a woman kind of spread eagles on the big bullseye target. And basically, the middle of the bullseye happened to be around a certain area of her body. I'll let your imaginations do the rest. And X marks the spot. And a blogger sent a letter into Target basically saying, look, you know, did you intend for that to be kind of sexual innuendo? Because my blog is really focused on media's impact on our children and on families. And I'm just kind of curious as to whether this was part of your plan. And she got a letter back from Target saying the following. Good morning, Amy. Thank you for contacting Target. Unfortunately, we're unable to respond to your inquiry because Target does not participate with non-traditional media outlets. This practice is in place to allow us to focus on publications that reach our core guests. So in other words, not only are you not a human being because you're a non-traditional media outlet, not only are you not important, but the people that read you are unimportant as well. A huge mistake. What actually happened was a massive outcry. Wall Street Journal, New York Times articles about it, and eventually Target basically took their one foot out their mouth to insert the other foot to basically say, well, the reason why we don't respond to bloggers is because we just don't have the manpower here. Shame. You know, they've got all the money to invest in huge, spectacular billboards in Times Square and 30-second spots, but they don't have enough money to invest in dialogue, in human beings, in customer service. To Andy's point, you can see how the two of us really dovetail nicely together, word of mouth and conversation. Final quick example is partnership. You know, Dell Computer Company had a lot of problems with one particular blogger, Jeff Jarvis, and this whole issue called Dell Hell. And I won't go into that for now because I know I'm a couple minutes over. But I just want to give you an example of something that they've done that really involves not just community, not just dialogue, but specifically partnership. They've got a program called Dell Idea Storm. So you want to know what the next Dell computer should look like, or what kind of bells and whistles and functions and features they should have? You can go there and you can suggest 3 USB ports or 2 USB ports. It'll be great if the projector, you know, cord was at the back versus the side, and here's why. You can actually go and literally build and suggest what the next generation Dell laptops look like. And then not only do you suggest these ideas, but people vote on them as well. So the best ideas win. And the beautiful thing about this is twofold. One is, you know, if you think about it, this is the dumbest idea in the world because Dell's competitors could go and literally read off every single idea and say, well, we're going to do the same and we'll do it quicker than Dell can. But what they don't anticipate and what they don't realize is the fact that everybody that is part of Dell's Idea Storm has a vested interest. It's not just Dell now, it's my Dell. It's I helped design this Dell as well. And so what they've done by partnering with their consumers is, number one, is they've conceded that their consumers are smarter than they are, or maybe as smart as they are. Number two is they've got ownership and vested interest. Number three is they've created this accessible, open environment where there is transparency, where they are keeping it real, where they have recognized that their consumers are not targets anymore, pun not intended, but in fact partners. So with that, I'm going to kind of wind down and turn it over to you for questions. There's so much to kind of get across. Obviously, you know, you've had to kind of stare at a very one-dimensional static photograph of me. Trust me, you got the better end of the deal because I'm sitting here in a towel and it's not a pretty sight. So with that said, let me thank you again for the opportunity and turn it over to you guys for questions.
Joseph, thank you very, very much for that. We know that you're giving us extra time and also, again, you being on holiday. So, ladies and gentlemen, any questions that you'd like to ask Joseph at all? I do have one about the 1995 Rugby World Cup final, but we'll deal with that after the other questions, Joseph.
Greatest day of my life.
No.
Hello, Joseph. It's Jake here. Listen, thanks for taking the time. And everyone here is eager and excited and contemplative, so you've definitely got the brains going. I was just sort of sitting here, and one of my people at the table with me is a guy who looks after a bank. And I was just thinking to myself, banks tend to be at the more conservative end of marketing. And I was just thinking, how would Joseph Jaffe run a bank? Because obviously conversations are, people get nervous in banks about having conversations because the share market twitches. So just quite seriously, how if you've got a very traditional organisation, how do you make the most of this great idea of joining the conversation?
Well, I guess the quick answer to the question is I would run it unlike most banks in the US right now. The second answer to the question is, it's interesting because banks are the quintessential faceless corporation. It's not that there is necessarily bad customer service, it's the fact that there's no service in a sense. It's very difficult to put a face to the bank. So the opportunity is so much more pronounced. Maybe you don't see as many shining light examples when it comes to banks, but it's been very interesting to watch companies like Intuit with respect to TurboTax and Quicken and a lot of their products, how they really have humanized their product and opened it up to community and to the wisdom of crowds. So the fact is, banks, I think because of that conservatism, there's almost a fear. There's a fear of joining the conversation. There's a fear of opening up. But banks have such an incredible role to play from a service standpoint, from an advice standpoint. If there is a reason, if there is a market for consultants and financial advisors that exists outside of banks, why shouldn't that competency and that core capability be something that the bank is able to use? And the way to use it is through the power of, for the most part, conversational marketing. So, I think the point is, when it comes to this idea of, let's zero in on the issue here of conservatism and risk-taking, I don't think necessarily that these two are mutually exclusive. I think they're kind of, in many respects, joined at the hip. But they shouldn't necessarily kind of be diametrically opposed. There are ways to innovate and to begin to understand this different world, this level playing field, without necessarily having to dive in headfirst. I call it experimentation. And I call the metric behind it ROE, return on experimentation. We need to do things that we've never done before, not because we can, but because we have to. We need to recognize that our consumers are innovating and moving quicker than we are. And because they're doing that, we're falling further and further behind. Banks were, if you think about it, one of the earliest industries to truly innovate and leapfrog by using automation, by using the web. Think about the ATM. Think about PC banking. There have been so many innovations. But what's happened in the process is in the continuous innovation automation, the humanity aspect has been lost. We need to put faces back and humanity back into banking. By doing that, and by the way, that has nothing to do with technology, it has nothing to do with social media, it has to do with humanity, being able to show a human face. Whether it's in the bank, in the branches, whether it's those free phone calls, whether it's fresh fruit, that's the in-store experience. Then there is a digital component, there is also a social component as well. There's even a virtual component as well. The sooner we do that, the sooner we see the bank that has, quite frankly, the balls to do that, reaping the competitive rewards in the process.